this is a little kind of unpacking of people pleasing in relationships for men specifically, because I think in our culture it's a normal thing to talk about women or people that identify as women and being people pleasers. We know this from thousands of centuries of women people pleasing. And something no one talks about is the fact that men do the same thing. And in our physiology, it's a freeze response, a freeze and fawn response. So if we think of fight, flight, freeze as those stress responses, freeze and fawn are what happen physiologically in our cells when we people please and appease the dynamic of a relationship. And we don't want to be stuck in freeze, because if we're stuck in freeze, we're going to feel like we're dead inside. I want to offer you some questions you can ask yourself to reflect on the ways that you may have learned this survival strategy as a young one. We need to look at people pleasing as a survival strategy, a learned behavior that we learned in order to keep ourselves safe, maintain connection, and keep the peace in our environment. So it's not necessarily a negative light, it's simply a way that we've learned how to survive. So I want to ask you, when you were a young one, did you find yourself in situations where you needed to put aside your own feelings, emotions, and expression in order to make your parent happy? It could be mom, it could be dad. Did you need to put aside your own emotions in order to make your parent happy? And be honest, because there's no reason to not be honest with yourself. You're going to grow if you're being honest. The second question is looking back and reflecting on what you needed to do to keep yourself safe and maybe to keep the peace at home. Looking back on that, how do you think that affects you now as a grown-up, as an adult? So I'll give you an example. So someone that I have worked with recently grew up in a single-parent household, and mom had to work a lot. So the child had to kind of maintain a certain facade or face, if you will, in order to ease her stress. If he was having troubles at school or needed extra support, he would just put on a front like everything's okay, because he didn't want to stress his mother out because she was a single parent and working overtime and already had a lot on her plate. So that's an example of someone, a child, needing to put their own needs and shelf them in order for the parent to maintain equilibrium, essentially. These questions are designed to give you some clarity. They're not always easy to answer because they do or have the potential to reveal some truths that maybe we don't want to look at. However, let's move on to how this affects people today. And this may be you, if you resonate with having crappy boundaries around mom, or feeling what she feels, or with your romantic partner. Maybe you take on their stresses and it turns into this enmeshment or codependent relationship. What happens when we do this, it's a survival pattern, is that our physiology feels a type of way. Meaning, if I even think about taking on my own mother's stress, I feel heat in my body, and I feel this kind of urge and need to say no. That's a physical impulse that I feel in my own system. So you may have your own bodily response, because what happens when we are enmeshed in childhood, or mom is codependent or needs to be parented by the child, is that boundaries are blurred. Things can be too close. So a lot of times it's like, I don't want to go visit my parent because it is stressful, it's overwhelming. So I just have a lot of space rather than too much space. And both are boundary issues. Boundaries can be, whoa, there's too much space between us, or they can also be it's too close together. So both of those things and those feelings are boundary issues. So one way you can start working with that is when you think about visiting, notice what happens in your body. You may notice a constriction in your throat, a tightness in your belly. You may notice even this freeze sense of numbing out. Starting to become aware of your bodily sensations starts to allow you to be present with those physicalized sensations so you don't override them, because we're so good at overriding what we're feeling in the moment. So just notice what you notice. So for example, right now, if I'm feeling heat and a tightness in my belly, I'm just going to sit with that. Notice my breath. At the same time, I'm going to notice my feet on the ground, and I may even notice my environment, my immediate environment. And if you haven't watched my video about orienting, it's right here, and it helps us feel safe, because if we are taking on other people's stress or baggage, it's like telling our body we're not safe. So it's really important to orient. So just taking in your immediate environment, noticing the textures, the colors. I actually see a little rabbit outside because there's rabbits where I am. And noticing how that affects your body. So I notice that I feel more spacious. My belly feels fuller. I feel more relaxed and at ease. So letting your physiology ride through these cycles of contraction, tension, and discomfort, and more expansion, settling, relaxation, this will help you start to build your capacity and your own self-awareness of when you may be merging with another in a relationship, meaning taking on their stuff, merging, people pleasing, and when you can have more space and self-agency to say, I'm not going to people please today. I actually would like to do this instead of bending or taking on other people's problems. So this is a little kind of unpacking of people pleasing in relationships for men specifically, because I think in our culture it's a normal thing to talk about women or people that identify as women and being people pleasers. We know this from thousands of centuries of women people pleasing. And something no one talks about is the fact that men do the same thing. And in our physiology, it's a freeze response, a freeze and fawn response. So if we think of fight, flight, freeze as those stress responses, freeze and fawn are what happen physiologically in our cells when we people please and appease the dynamic of a relationship. And we don't want to be stuck in freeze, because if we're stuck in freeze, we're going to feel like we're dead inside. If we're stuck in freeze and people pleasing and appeasement, not only are we going to feel like we're dead inside, our organs will actually start to shut down and not function optimally. So our health is affected. So it's really important to consider our history with the survival strategy and how we can tease out and work on healing it. And that's what I teach people in my one-on-one work and my online programs. So if you want to check out nervous system regulation made simple, I highly suggest it. It helps people come out of the freeze response, out of the fawn response, by regulating the nervous system. I hope you learned something new in this video. Make sure you comment below if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Take good care.